Hi, I'm Richard, and I'm going to show you how to implement Cash App Pay using Web Payments SDK. Before we start, you'll want to be sure that you have a Square developer account, and you may want a Cash App account as well, but it's not totally necessary. We're first going to cover the different flows someone will experience when trying to pay with Cash App Pay, and then I'll show you how the implementation process works. When integrating Cash App Pay, it's important to know the different flows someone might go through when paying via Cash App. When visiting from a mobile device or a desktop computer, they go through a slightly different experience. Let's take a look at how that works. We're first exploring how this works on the desktop. Here we have the Cash App Pay button rendering, so let's click on it to pay with Cash App. It brings up a QR code for us to scan. Now, it's important to note here that in Sandbox, you need to be sure to use your phone's native camera to scan the QR code. But in production, you can use either the native camera app or the QR scanner within Cash App. Now that we scan this QR code, we can authorize a payment and we have a successful payment. Let's now look at how this works when visiting on a mobile device. Our payment buttons look pretty much the same, but since we're on a mobile device, it wouldn't really make sense to use a QR code scanner since we can't scan it with our phone. Web Payments SDK will automatically check whether the customer is visiting using a mobile browser, and we can see if I click Cash App Pay, it directs us to the payment authorization page. It's important to note that this is only how it works in Sandbox. In production, it will actually use a deep link to Cash App and direct the customer to authorize the payment directly in Cash App on their mobile device. Now that we know what the buyer flow looks like for taking a payment with Cash App Pay, let's walk through how to implement Cash App Pay using Web Payments SDK. If you're following along with us, you'll want to be sure to set up your Sandbox access token by copying the .env.example file to a new file named .env.sandbox and setting your Sandbox access token on the Square access token environment variable. Now let's start up the app. Open up the terminal and run npm run dev. Great! Now let's go to localhost with port 3000 in our browser and we have our app loading. We'll navigate to Cash App Pay and we see that we have an error message telling us that our application ID and/or location ID are incorrect. Let's go set those. We'll find this in the public folder under examples and it is named cashappay.html. Let's paste in our Sandbox application ID and location ID here. Now we can save and reload the page. Awesome, the error message isn't showing up and we see the Cash App Pay button showing. Let's test making a payment. I'll just go ahead and scan this QR code to approve our payment. Our test payment went through. So we've shown how to configure the Quickstart app for Cash App Pay and see that we got a test payment working. Now let's walk through the implementation of this so you can learn how to add this to your own application. We're back in cashappay.html. The first function we've created here is the build payment request function. This takes in a payments object and then creates a payment request using the payments object and returns it. This is important because just like with digital wallets, we need to tell Cash App how much is going to be charged for the payment. Now we're at our initialize Cash App function, which also takes a payments object as an argument. We use the build payment request function from above to create our payment request. Then we're initializing Cash App Pay by creating a Cash App Pay variable and assigning it by awaiting on payments.cashappay, passing in the payment request we created and providing an object with a redirect URL and an optional reference ID. Next, we're specifying some style options and then attaching Cash App Pay to the DOM by awaiting on cashappay.attach, passing in the ID of the element we want to replace in the DOM with our Cash App Pay button and our style options. As we work our way further down, we have our create payment function. This is just a helper function for handling processing a payment by taking the token we get back from Web Payments SDK and sending it to our backend/payment endpoint using the browser's fetch API. Next, we have a helper function named display payment results that is used to provide feedback in the DOM as to whether a payment request succeeded or failed. Now that we've worked our way through all of those functions, we can look at how they are implemented to create a checkout experience. We've put all of our implementation for Web Payments SDK inside of an event listener on the DOM content loaded event. This helps ensure that the Web Payments SDK JavaScript library is already loaded in the DOM, so we have access to initialize it. We then check to be sure whether Square.js is loaded properly, and then we proceed to initialize the Web Payments SDK. This is done here by just passing in our application ID and location ID to the Square.payments method and assigning it to the payments variable. Next, we're initializing Cash App Pay using our function from above and passing in our payments object. Since the initialize Cash App Pay function is handling initialization and attaching our Cash App Pay button to the DOM, we then just need to add an event listener using the add event listener method on our Cash App Pay object. We do this by passing in the onTokenization string and a function for handling the result of our tokenization. You can see here we're checking if our tokenization was successful and then passing the token to our createPayment function we showed above. Finally, we call the displayPaymentResults function to show we had a success and then log our results. And that covers how to implement Cash App Pay with Web Payments SDK. If you want to learn more about the backend portion or just see an end-to-end payment flow, be sure to check out our video on end-to-end payments with Web Payments SDK. As always, be sure to check our documentation for more information on all the features you can use for Cash App Pay with Web Payments SDK. Happy coding!